Okay, it's 7 p.m., so we will call the special meeting of the Danby Select Board, October 21, 2021, to order. Please rise and join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Steve Haynes. Here. Doug White. Tom Fuller. Here. Mike Powers. Here. Brad Bender. Here. I will entertain a motion to set the agenda, and Tom, I believe you had mentioned something about an executive session.
Yeah, I think we should, we can either do the road commissioner's report or go into executive session and then do that stuff after. I guess road commissioner report and then go into executive session after that.
Okay, and then following with 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Okay, and under old business, I've had a request by the treasurer to talk about our purchasing policy, so I'd like to include that in there. And has everybody seen the memo that was sent out about legislative reapportionment that came in today's email from the town clerk?
I have not.
Okay. I'm going to insert that after Emergency Management Committee. And we can talk about that at that point. Any other changes in the agenda?
Does the person have to get their name on to make a public comment?
No. Okay, then I will entertain a motion to set the agenda as discussed.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of September 9th, 2021 Select Board meeting.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Are there any corrections or deletions to discuss on the minutes of September 9th? There being none, all those in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we will have the Regional and Local Planning Commission reports by Shelley Taylor.
At the regional meeting in September, we got 45-day warnings, or 45-day notices concerning solar projects. There were 3 in total. Hartsboro Road in Wallingford, that's a 500 kilowatt. DG Solar in Pittsford, and Boardman Hill Solar project in West Rutland.
How big were the last two? You said the first one was 500 kW.
Yeah.
What were the next two? Did they?
I didn't note it down. Probably the same, but I would have to look.
And what was the last one? I have Hartsboro Road in Wallingford and DG.
Boardman Hill in West Rutland.
Okay.
And they discussed the V-Trans work they're doing in Pittsford on Route 7. And for the local planning commission, we met in October and we set our meeting schedule for the 2022? It will be, won't it?
Yeah.
So our next meeting is in January of 2022, and we are going to keep to the quarterly meetings unless something comes up that needs more attention from the select board or anywhere else.
Do you have a date on that, January
It's
2020?
the first Thursday.
It's the 6th, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. And that's it.
Thank you, Shelley. Eric.
Yes.
Eric Hall from the Rutland Regional Planning Commission is here to give us a presentation on the ARPA funds.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Happy to be making the rounds in the county and starting to help towns kind of decipher the guidance and really, start to understand the direction that that you can go with these funds. So the town of Danby is set to receive $392,190.96 in NEU and county money. You should have received half of that already in 2 payments. The NEU amount would have been $68,675, and the county amount would be $127,420. So, as all of you know, this is through the American Rescue Plan Act. The funds are in response to the public health emergency. Really, the goal is to meet pandemic response needs and rebuild a stronger, more equitable economy. So, what does that mean? Well, basically there's kind of a few different areas that are focused, kind of broad eligibility areas. Those are supporting the public health response, replacing public sector revenue loss, infrastructure projects including water, sewer, and broadband, and then addressing negative economic impacts of the public health emergency. Now those are very broad areas, and so the biggest thing is determining what the priorities are in each community. That might be different for different towns that don't have water or wastewater or things like that. So the place to start is with public involvement, trying to get some input from the community, and use that input to make a list that's based on priority, and kind of vet that for eligibility, because some suggestions may just not be eligible. Some may be in an area that's kind of still gray. There is guidance that's still coming out. Treasury's interim final rule went through a comment period. There are some frequently asked question documents on Vermont League of Cities and Towns website that are pretty extensive, but that final ruling from Treasury isn't out yet and isn't expected until possibly later this fall. So the biggest thing to remember is getting that involvement and taking your time in a sense. You have until the end of 2024 to obligate funds. So that means basically initiating the contracting process, or having contracts in place at least by that point. And then the funds need to be spent by the end of 2026.
Now, you're saying Treasury's final rule isn't out, so we wouldn't want to jump into anything too soon anyways, because the problem is it may not fall into what they're... So we have money in hand, but it really isn't money we want to spend right now because of the fact that until we have final rule, we could be spending it in a non-eligible
Eligible manner.
manner.
Right, and you know, the interim final rule is 150 pages long and has these main areas of eligibility. Those areas aren't really going to change, but taking the time and, you know, getting input and prioritizing the list is going to give you time to, you know, see what may change with the final rule. And then, you know, use that and take the list that you've created and say, okay, you know, these are the highest priority. And another thing to consider is having the greatest impact, the greatest reach. So projects that impact the most, you know, number of people in town or have the greatest, you know, the greatest impact on the town. So, you know, taking your time, making sure the eligibility is 100% clear, eligibility guidelines are 100% clear and final, is a good approach to take, because, you know, the reporting deadline, which was initially, the first quarter reporting was initially due in October, has now been pushed out for the reporting period to end in March of 2022. So your first report will not be due until April of 2022. So, you know, with that, that'll provide some, you know, some time to learn not only that system, because the town does have to do the reporting, but also see what else other communities are doing. There's a lot of resources that are developing. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns is a great place to go for those resources. They have an ARPA specific page, and there's new things coming out on there weekly. So a couple things that are in the works are the possibility of a kind of a dashboard where towns can see what other towns are either planning on doing or have, you know, confirmed that it's a project that's, you know, going to go through. So the sharing of ideas and really having discussions, you know, doesn't hurt to set up a public meeting, and that's what the RPC is here for, is to help facilitate public meetings, and you know, whether it's taking ideas that maybe you know, maybe you've received via email, or just suggestions, and creating a survey. That's something we could help you with, is putting that together and having you know, the community weigh in that way. There's many different options for getting input, and then also going through kind of the vetting process of determining you know, what projects are eligible, and then it is up to the town to make the final decision on how the funds are spent. But, you know, there are a couple things to keep in mind. General infrastructure capital projects are not eligible. One definite eligible project is digitizing records, so land records, cybersecurity, in a sense, depending on how that, you know, how that is integrated into the town's day-to-day operation. And you know, really there's a lot developing by the day, by the week, and so keeping in touch, reaching out with questions to me, as well as the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They're a great resource and have somebody specifically designated to ARPA funds.
Now, the dashboard that you were talking about, is that a certain it's going to happen, or that's just something that sounds like a great idea?
Pretty sure it's going to happen. You know, it's still
Is it
in
going
the
to have like a wall board where people can bounce things around as well, or is it just more or less these are our projects?
So I think it's going to be more, these are the projects. The bouncing around of ideas can be done right through either myself at the RPC or the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They have an email designated specifically to ARPA questions. You know, does this project fall into ARPA eligibility? So using those, you know, those channels to narrow things down and, you know, make sure that it's a clear yes or no on eligibility is going to be important. But really that's kind of what I have for the general overview.
Well, it's quite early in the process right now anyways, and we appreciate you bringing us up to, I guess the one other question that I had that you brought up is the reporting.
That's still another piece that is yet to be finalized.
Okay.
You know, I believe there's a system called IDEMI, which, you know, was originally discussed as the channel to basically log into this system and report through there. But the extension of that reporting deadline gave Treasury some time to still develop guidelines and, you know, whether it's a user guide or, you know, something to that effect for reporting.
So should we be reaching out to you, or you're gonna kind of give us as it develops, you'll stay in contact with us too?
Yep, so the latter. So that's what I've been trying to do is send out some, you know, sometimes it just mirrors what Vermont League of Cities and Towns has been sending out, because the town, if you are a member of VLCT, should be receiving bi-weekly updates, I think.
We are.
And so I've been trying to echo some of those with some more, you know, some other highlights that come up in discussions. And so keep an eye on those updates, and I will as well continue to reach out and provide, you know, kind of those milestones as they are, as they're determined.
So a month and a half ago, we posted a letter around town and on our website asking the public to give us suggestions if they had some, and we listed the 6 areas. And to date, we have not received any comments from anyone. So I see a few people in the audience here this evening. Does anybody have comments on the ARPA funds?
Yeah, I've got one thing I wanted to offer. Brad, I'm representing the Danby Mount Tabor Now group, and they're the ones that, if you don't know, constructed the memorial downtown in the village and maintain it. Put on other events around here, concerts, Memorial Day celebration, trunk or treat, and that kind of thing. We're prepared and would like to offer to put together and organize and facilitate a public workshop, maybe accelerate this a little bit and drive some interest. Which I know a letter is one way to do it, but I think we're going to do this in a more active way. And it's similar to what I know other cities and towns in Vermont have done. And it's important, we think, for citizens to have a say in this. Sometimes they don't have a lot to say, but maybe with a little encouragement they will. But anyway, the way it's going to work is we'll publicize it in the near future and do the same thing as you did, and ask for input. And when we get that, assuming we do, we'll compile it, print it up, and make it public for everybody to look at. And then later on, we'll conduct a virtual workshop with everybody that gets online and can work through all this. One of the important things, I think, and Eric, is to make sure that we're in line with the parameters that are in the plan.
Yep.
And by the way, one of those final rules, I didn't hear when you say they might be.
There's not a definitive date.
Okay.
You know,
So
the final rule's
I
expected this
was
fall.
trying to read through the final rules till my eyes glazed over, but it's pretty detailed
Yep.
anyway. So we'll have this workshop, work through the ideas, and as I say, look at the parameters, and then we'll write up a final recommendation and present it to you gentlemen for your use. We'd be very happy to do that and plan to do it.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay.
Any other comments?
How do we get hold of you?
I'll give you my
I just
card.
wanted to have clarification was you said no capital projects, so something like building affordable housing
So,
not be included?
no, so housing, there are some areas where housing fits in as eligible. Capital projects, by that I mean like,
Infrastructure.
yeah, like,
Building.
just paving a road or, building a new or a new salt shed. Those are not ARPA eligible projects, but there are some, so to address the public health emergency and issues that are exacerbated by it, childcare or housing, those are areas where, if there's a need in the area for those, then you can explore projects that, that will improve accessibility to those things in the area. One thing to keep in mind is this money that's come direct to municipalities is, what you're seeing as the start, but the state also has a lot of ARPA money that they are pushing through different agencies. We actually just had there was a funders webinar, and there were 5 different agencies that spoke on, what ARPA funds they're receiving and what, what projects would be eligible through those. And so there could be grants out there. There are other funds that are coming in. So another thing to keep in mind is leveraging funds. So keep an eye out for opportunities that, in the sense of housing, there's a significant amount of housing money that's coming through ARPA, to the state for that specifically. So if you have a project, you may be able to find funding for that project through another avenue other than these specific municipal ARPA funds. So that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. There's let's see, a couple other just thoughts that that I have here as far as potential projects. So as we learn more, and this is, like I said, we're continuing to learn more by the week, eligible projects or discussions on eligible projects that relate to emergency operation centers. So your EOC, updating technology in the EOC is looking like it could be a potential eligible use. Or when we look at water, wastewater, and broadband as like the infrastructure pieces, water and wastewater has to comply with the Clean Water Act and state Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Part of eligible projects underneath those umbrellas could also potentially include your municipal roads general permit projects. So potentially, stormwater related projects, may have an eligible applicability.
And to clarify that, under the municipal ARPA money or under
the municipal ARPA money.
Because when you gave me the other agencies there, I just wanted to make
Yep,
sure that.
sorry, I'm jumping around a little. But again, there may be some additional money through A&R or, another agency to fund some of these other projects too. And the good thing is, in hearing different pieces from different agencies, it sounds like the agencies are going to communicate with each other as well. So if they get an inquiry from a town about a project and it doesn't necessarily meet their funding criteria, they may be able to point you in another direction. And so the communication piece is really important, and it's going to take some time to work through the channels, but at the end of the day, I think you're going to be able to maximize what you can get for, with the funds that you have. That's going to be a good focus to really try to use what other funds are available out there too.
I have a question. You mentioned like wastewater. What about like solid waste facilities? Since there's more of a population, more people staying home, there's a need to improve. What if there was a need to like improve a solid waste facility?
Yep, so upgrades to, to wastewater facilities or building a brand new facility. If it's deemed that a wastewater facility is needed and there isn't one.
What about solid waste?
I think she's asking for garbage.
I'm not 100% sure on that, and let me look into that.
I mean, just like pandemic-wise, there are a lot more people moving to rural areas and putting further stress on infrastructure.
Right. That's a really good point. And I can look into that and get back to the board with some information on that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions before we move on? We have quite a healthy agenda. Okay, thank you very much, Eric.
You're welcome. Thank you. Be
Appreciate
in touch, and yeah, I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about in the future.
Thank you.
Good. Next on our agenda is a presentation from Mr. Franco Rossi, who is the president of CAI Technologies that we have engaged to handle our tax mapping. So if the public wants to swing their chairs around, he's going to be presenting over there on the back wall.
Thank you. CAI Technologies has been providing mapping and GIS services to municipalities in Vermont since 36 years. We currently serve more than half of all the towns and cities and towns in the state of Vermont. We actually serve somewhere in the vicinity of 650 local and regional governments. Through our acquisition of Russell Graphics, who was doing the providing the services before, we picked this up, and besides the myriad reasons why it's great for you to be working with us, there are two primary issues that are important to keep in mind. Number one, the town now owns all digital data from the mapping, for the mapping services. In the past, it was owned by the previous consultant, or at least that was his position. Our position is our clients own everything. We simply maintain it with a curator of your data. The second really valuable change is that all the data have been converted to current modern GIS technology. As opposed to previously it was done in an old version of CAD. So now that the data are current and in GIS format, the town can choose to, if and when it makes sense for you, to capitalize on the data and use the data in a lot of different ways. What I'm here to do tonight is to show you, besides answering other questions, is to show you our online solution that we provide to many of our clients, and for your consideration to see if it fits for your needs. I know you got a long agenda tonight. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly, but please stop me and ask me questions whenever you want. I think the best way to show what GIS can do for you is to just dive in and show you what other towns are already doing. What you're looking at on the screen right now, I hope everybody can see, is a list of all of our clients that are currently using this technology. And you can see that 54 of them are here in Vermont. I think the closest ones to you are Pollitt and Wells. I'll go to any of these clients. By the way, anything we're looking at, we're actually looking live. This is the town's public-facing site. This is not a canned demonstration, so I hope it doesn't go bad. So unless there's a town you prefer I go to, I don't know if the board cares, I figure I'd go to Pollitt just because they're close in similar towns. So, You'll see as I go from open sites, you'll see that they all look the same, it's just different data. The application is the application. So this is the town of Pollitt. This is where you interact with, what we have linked now is the assessment, the CAMA database and the grand list data, if you will. But it's more the CAMA part of that, of the database. So you can search for parcels. Again, this is a public facing site. We do offer a staff site as well that you could have, that has added functionality and data that you may want for internal purposes, but not for the public. I'll tell you if I go to any of those, if we're looking at a staff site. Right now, we're looking at, this is all public. So we can search for a parcel. Anybody know anybody in Pollitt?
Wait, W-A-I-T.
W-A-I-T. There's Wait Hill Road. Is it a name, Wait?
Let's see.
Let's see, Ashley.
Ashley's good, Big Ashley.
Bruce and Janet, let's go to Ashley. So you see, I click on it, it tells me that they own 4 abutting properties. So, you know, in Vermont, you have inactive parcels, and they're all assessed together. This is how we're identifying it in this town. So the note came up and told me that. This is the Wait property we selected, and these are the 4 other properties that go with that Wait property. So it zooms right to it, highlights those parcels.
Now, I guess this is as good as time to ask the question. And what was used for data for the actual mapping of that, so that you're feeling that those are accurate, those
That's the tax maps. The maps that you have hanging over there.
Okay.
So it's the tax maps.
Well, where I was going with this is our original maps have a lot of inaccuracies on them. And so how is the data, are they going to be more accurate?
No, they're going to be exactly what they are. There's not going to be any more or less accurate. However, with this technology, you'll be able to see it, and it'll be a lot easier to identify inaccuracies. So for example, since you asked the question, and I don't mind jumping around at all, but one of the features the site comes with is all this base map imagery. We're an Esri business partner, so we have all this Esri imagery available, Environmental Systems Research Institute. Local imagery, which is typically state imagery. Some towns have custom imagery that might be there, but most towns don't. And then there's others, which is where we stick Google, because we're an Esri business partner and they wouldn't like us to have a Google tab there. But I'm going to go to the Google imagery because that's what people are used to looking at. So now you can look at the data with the imagery right in the background. So a lot of times the errors or inconsistencies will jump right out at you. And I don't know if anything, we did the original maps in Pollitt, so they're probably perfect. But sometimes you see when you overlay on physical features, some things don't quite line up. I'm having a hard time finding one here, but we'll see one as we go somewhere. But you know, maybe this line is off this hedgerow way up here, and you know the property line's there. A lot more people are able to look at the data, identify inconsistencies, and fix them. And that's one of the values to this site, is that the data can keep getting better and better because more people are looking at those.
Now, with that, who is fixing it? Us or you?
Well, assuming you're working with us, that would be us as part of your annual maintenance service that we already provide.
So would that involve you coming out and resurveying?
No, it would be taking existing data and recompiling, more accurately recompiling it if there are issues.
I think some of the issues are lines are wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah. Like
Right,
property
so-
lines are.
And you do not actually survey.
No, we don't do surveys, we take existing data and compile it. So if you say a line's wrong on the map, then presumably there's some supporting documentation to identify it as an incorrect line. Provide that documentation, and we'll do this now. You don't need this service, that's part of the town's maintenance service. Provide the documentation, we'll review it and recompile the lines based on the documentation you can give us. That's part of the annual maintenance service that we already provide. Did I answer that question? I don't know where.
Yeah, I believe.
I'm gonna go back to just the map for now. So I showed you searching for a parcel. You can search by owner name, you can search by parcel ID, which most people don't know, or you can search by address to locate parcels. You can also do a geographic search. So for example, I want everybody on, whatever is this, Andrews Drive. I can create a, I can just,
Road, you're like getting behind what else coming.
I can just go like this, and it's going to give me a list of everybody that's in that polygon I just drew. It's just arbitrary polygon. Okay. So let's just say, for talk's sake, this is the parcel I had selected, and this is what I'm looking at. This information, the documents and links and the assessment data, that's all coming directly from the town's CAMA database, right? When we set the site up for the clients, we show as much or as little of that data as you choose to show. Of course, it's virtually all public information, so you could, a lot of times, just say put it all out there. Some pick and choose the fields they want to show. So I can look at the assessment data, or in this case, they're separated by land and improvements for buildings. That's structured up front, but depending on what you choose, how you choose to set it up. There's documents and links. So this is a CAI property card, CAI being us. That's simply a report of and showing the fields that they choose to show to the public. Oftentimes, you get requests for the property record cards, the tax cards for properties. This is their report. This is how they're showing the data. I'm going to jump to Wells because they chose a little different route. Anybody know the name Wells?
Shattuck.
Shattuck.
S-H-A-T-T-U-C-K.
Carol or Roger, do you care?
Roger.
Roger. So there's Roger Shattuck's property. You'll see their property record card is actually the Microsoft. They're having their property record cards hosted with Avatar. So when you click on that, it actually opens up the Avatar site, goes right to that property record card. And that's how they're choosing to show it. Still others will create PDFs of their property record cards and link them and have that as what's available to the public. Okay. Go back to Pollitt. So you can have any data you want. I mean, some clients have surveys. The survey that was done for the property. Oops. To here. Wrong state. Littleton, New Hampshire. Some towns have a splash screen comes up. It might be a disclaimer, it might be information, who to contact if you have questions, etc. If I go to Rossi and I go to, that's our office, and you'll see in Littleton they are linking the surveys. That's the survey up for that property. So you can link any documents you choose.
Now, I guess, so this is another service you're offering to us is what
Yes.
we're,
Yes.
okay.
Yep. Another valuable tool to this is doing a butters list. So I've selected a parcel, I need a butters. I don't know, what are a butters here? Is it direct to butters normally, or is there a distance? Anybody know?
Usually direct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just put in 0 because we want direct to butters. I hit select. Now it's showing me the direct to butters. Now direct also means across the street. So we have this add remove tool and say I need to add this one to my list. So now I get a butters report. Subject parcel would be a butters, and I can mailing labels and say I've started, my sheet's already started, start printing the labels there. And I got my, really I do, swear to God. So we'll have live demos. Let me see what's going on here. There we go. So there's my mailing labels. So in seconds, you've got that information done instead of trying to put together manually put together a report. I accidentally.
So you guys, with your service, do all this compiling of this data for us?
We don't compile data because it already exists. What we do is take the data you already have and we link it. So GIS is Geographic Information System. In simplest terms, it's taking attribute data. In most cases, it's the assessment database, but it can be any type of database, linking it to the graphic data, which is your property maps. So now map 12 lot 47 knows that it's map 12 lot 47 and it knows everything about itself. It also knows about the stuff around it. And you can query it and you can do things like this. So we take those databases, your existing, do you use Microsoft here? Do anybody know?
I believe so.
Yeah. So you use the Microsoft database and we link it to your existing maps. And create that's how we create the GIS in that way. We also provide, it comes with a data processor. So throughout the year, Smith sells to Jones, you update, as you do now, your data throughout the year, run the data processor so your website's current. So when you go to do an abutters list, you're getting the current ownership information and you have complete control over that. Whoever's maintaining that data now here won't have to do anything different except run the data processor when they've made changes. And we can actually even automate that to run every night if you chose to do that. I don't remember what I looked up. I guess it doesn't matter. Again, I'm trying to get through this fairly quickly, so I apologize and just interrupt me. So I showed you the abutters tool. If you have a staff site, that abutters tool turns into really a buffer tool. So if you turn on all these layers that are available and more, you can have as many layers as you want. But let's just say I turn on the flood map. I want to see exactly how the floodplain affects specific parcels. In a staff site, you can select the floodplain, it doesn't have to be a parcel, and you can find everybody that's within the floodplain, or wetlands, or whatever the case may be. So it becomes a valuable tool for, conservation, planning, these layers are what Paula chose to show. This is Regional Planning Commission data. Just all comes right from them. It's all grouped together. Different towns will group them differently. If I turn that on, you'll see all kinds of... Takes a minute because it's a lot of data. Oh, it's not going on because none of these are checked off. Anyway, I'm not sure what they have in Pollen, so I won't go through the process of turning it on. But you can click these on and off accordingly, just like you do the floodplain or the wetlands. It's very simple to use measure tools. So you mentioned there's errors in the maps. This map is wrong, the acreage is wrong. This is supposed to be 20 acres and it's showing 15, I don't know. It's very easy to use measure tools here. So I want to calculate an area. I can just double check, is the area, I'm not going to be careful, so I'm just going to go through quickly. 6.6 acres, that's what it calculates to. So my first question is, when you've got a mapping question or a problem, map says it's 15, no it isn't, it's 20. First thing you can do, maybe there's just an error on the map, calculate the area and make sure it's right. And if it still calculates to 15, then there must be a line wrong if there's in fact 20 acres there. But if the lines are right, then there's not 20 acres there, there's 15 acres there. Okay? But it's a very valuable tool to address those types of problems. You can also use it to, how much of this parcel is in the floodplain? To the extent of the accuracy of the floodplain, obviously, but .93 of that 2.4 acres calculates to within the floodplain. It's point and click, you don't have to know anything about GIS, everything's done in the background. You see I'm just clicking on the parcel. Okay? Anybody want to talk about layers at all, or I'll move on. There's some drawing tools. This can be a good communicative tool. So if I want to say, okay, I want to create a point, I want it to be red, I want to put it right here, and I want to add some text, and I want to say clogged culvert. I want to make that red. And I want to make an arrow. And I want to print that. And, oops. I want to print that and send that to my road agent. Way to communicate. One of our clients used the drawing tools to create a map for their 250th anniversary. They had a parade, they created a map, points of interest, and posted it around town and put it on their website. So it's not, you're not actually adding data to the site, you're just creating a map and creating a PDF of that. Okay. I showed you base maps, all the different imagery that's available. This is areas of interest. That's just bookmarks, essentially. I want to go to the fire department quickly. Brings you to the middle. I go to the landfill. So, sharing. So this is a good tool. If I turn on my flood map, just so I can see something. So I'm looking at the flood, this is what I'm looking at right now. And I want someone else to look at exactly what I'm looking at. I'm talking to them on the phone or whatever it is. I hit the share button, I copy this, I open my email, compose an email, I put it in the body, I send it to them. When they click on it, it opens a site right to this with the exact same layers on the same extents, so you know you're looking at the exact same thing. Of course I could print this and send a PDF, but that's kind of an active communication way of doing that. Identify tool, that's how you click and get information on each one, but also when it's active, you can, by the way, these photos are coming right out of the camera as well. You also can hover over a parcel, you don't have to drill down and you can get that information ownership, but just a quick thumbnail of the owner, the address, and the parcel ID. That just wipes out what I've been doing, zooming in and out. That zooms to extent. This is zoomed to my location. Not really necessarily a valuable tool when you're sitting here at your desk, but it is. All this works on a mobile device. So if you're out on your mobile device and you hit that, it'll zoom right to where you're standing using the GPS on your phone or tablet. I was in Waterbury doing this, and one of the guys in the crowd uses it, said he used it when he was hunting to know whose land he was on. Zoom to extents, previous view, next view. This is a zoom box, just like you're used to, probably seen a million times. Street View. I don't know if anybody's used Google Street View before, but it's built in, so you don't have to leave the site, so to speak. I'll zoom out a little bit. So you see that blue arrow, it's showing me where I am, where I'm going. And it's also showing me the direction I'm looking. Kind of keeps you grounded in the site. You don't have to open another site. Printing. You can do a quick and dirty map like this. That's essentially like throwing it on a photocopier, right? Print the PDF. You can print the map, and there it is. It's like throwing it on a photocopier. You could also drill down and say, okay, I want to do I want to do a landscape. You can do 11 by 17. You can change the scale. You can put in a map title. And I want to show the legend because I want to know what that information on the map is. So now it's actually putting together a professional map with a border, north arrow, town seal if you've got it, the scale, etc. So I print that, and there's the map. And it's got a legend showing me that what these things mean, the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain. So very powerful printing tools. If you have a staff site, the printing tools expand. If you have a wide format printer, you can print 24 by 36 maps or whatever the case may be. Again, very quickly, it's showing you coordinates down here. You can change the coordinate system to state plane feet, meters, whatever you want. Also, feedback. This is a good way to communicate issues or problems, not only with the map, but if you're running into a problem with the site, you don't know how to do something, or there's a map problem. Some of our clients say, map 7 lot 42 isn't linking to anything. It's telling me there's nothing linked to it. So it goes right to our support staff when they work on that. Also, there's this help, which is, there's a feature tour, so you can go step by step. Remember, this is open to the public. The last thing you want is the public calling you up saying, how do I, that kind of defeats the purpose. There's also a documentation, and it's kind of an interactive PDF. So I can't remember how to do an abutters list. I click on it, takes me right to it, and shows me how to do the abutters list. That's just if you have a staff site, that's how you get into it. Disclaimer, that can be whatever you want. Oftentimes it's the disclaimer that's on the tax maps themselves. You see that that can be customized to whatever you want. I've flown through this thing. There's a ton more functionality, additional things. There's document upload tools, so you can scan and link your own documents, building permits, septic approvals, things like that. But I recognize your time constraints, and I want to leave time for questions if there are any, or we can just hold it up.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Rossi. It's good to see that we're in the 21st century.
Well, you're on the 20th century. The 21st is available to you now.
Shelley, could you ask Stephanie to come in, please?
I'm just going to be a minute shutting this down.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, next on the agenda we have Stephanie Bork, who's been working with our local hazard mitigation folks, developing a plan, and we are involved with the town of Mount Tabor on that. So, Stephanie, glasses on fog.
I'll wing it here until I activate. So, yes, thank you for the introduction. Stephanie Berg with the Regional Planning Commission. And I'm working with a group of folks from Danby and Mount Tabor, who I call the planning team. They consist of Shelley Taylor, Tom Johnston, who's here tonight as well, and then Phil Lidstone from Mount Tabor. And on their behalf, I'm here to pretty much share the work to date of that group on what's called the Danby Mount Tabor Multi-Jurisdiction Hazard Mitigation Plan. So I've got a bunch of handouts. I'm going to just set these off to the side because this is the packet for Mount Tabor that I might leave down here and make sure that it gets over to them. But I've got a copy for the town clerk so that you could have a hard copy for folks to look at during the public comment period. An extra copy for your planning commission. And then I've got 5 sets here for the select board.
Thank you. Hey, how are you?
Oops, I gave you something on the bottom that
Okay, thank you.
Alright,
Thank you.
and then you must have some other member who's not here tonight.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll just leave that as an extra. And then this is the large map that will go with the copy for the. So now that you all have a copy of the products in front of you, I'll just take just a couple minutes to kind of introduce what you're looking at. The top document is the plan review tool. So this plan is one that needs to be ultimately approved by FEMA. And so when you submit the plan for review, this is the checklist that they're using to make sure that the plan has all the federally required contents. So as you review the draft, you may be questioning yourself, you know, well, why is this in here? Maybe why isn't something else in there? This review tool pretty much directs the content of the plan. So right now, it's partially filled out with placeholders in terms of what section the plan, once it's finalized, will address each of these requirements, but all the page numbers are left blank because, you know, we don't know where things are ultimately going to sugar out. But this is kind of the guideline that we use in terms of the plan contents. So the planning team has reached the first critical milestone in the plan development process, and that is work through the hazard identification and risk assessment part of the plan. So what you have before you tonight is a plan that has a full table of contents, but only half the content. So we're at pretty much what I would consider the midpoint in the plan. So you've got a very brief introduction that talks about kind of what hazard mitigation is and how it's different from emergency response. You know, this is not an emergency response kind of plan. This is not the kind of plan where we're going to talk about how Tom and his folks at the fire department would respond to some kind of incident. This is a mitigation plan which lays out projects or actions that are more of a kind of long-term investment in reducing future impacts from natural events, natural hazard events. So that's kind of spelled out in the introduction. That's followed by a very brief plan purpose. I like to note for folks the last sentence of the plan purpose, you know, that once adopted, this plan is not legally binding. So this is not any kind of like contract between the towns and FEMA. FEMA's not going to be like chasing you down to see if you've completed your actions. They're not going to withhold any federal public assistance monies from a federally declared disaster if there's things that you don't get to. This is really just a planning tool for the communities of Danby and Mount Tabor. So the benefits, I think, are many in terms of having a plan like this. But I think one of the ones that most towns tend to prioritize are the financial benefits of having this kind of plan. So the state has set up an incentive program for towns that take certain flood resiliency measures to make your town more resilient to flooding. And in the case of a federally declared disaster, they will chip in additional money if towns have an annual local emergency management plan Tom typically usually takes care of preparing that for the town of Danby. You've got adopted road and bridge standards that meet the V-Trans minimums. You participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, and you have a current FEMA hazard mitigation plan. So if you don't have a hazard mitigation plan and you have those other three things, you only get 7.5% match from the state. Whereas if you have this plan, that match goes up to 12.5%. So, you know, there are, I think, some financial incentives beyond just planning incentives to having a plan like this current in your community. So the purpose is followed by a pretty brief community profile, which basically provides kind of a thumbnail sketch about the community characteristics in Danby and Mount Tabor to give the reader, you know, the folks at the state, you know, the state hazard mitigation officer and folks with FEMA Region 1, some insight into what characteristics of your community may make it more resilient or potentially more vulnerable to impacts from natural hazards. So you should see a lot of similar information maybe from your town plans. We draw from those kinds of documents. And then on page 4, there's a map with some locally important routes that would be used for things like throughways, detours, shortcuts, and access to critical facilities. That data came from input that we got from the towns back in 2019 as part of the V-Trans project. They've developed an online tool that's kind of a transportation resiliency planning tool. And so we pulled that information from that project and incorporated it into the plan. Because as you get through the plan and you start to look at areas that might be vulnerable to impacts from things like flooding or winter snow drifting, if those areas also tend to happen to be locally important for these other uses, it helps in the prioritization process of maybe that would be a good place to work. So following the community profile on page 5 of the plan, we start to document the planning process. That's a big deal for FEMA. They really want to see how you've gone about getting this plan update completed as the communities. So one of the key features that they look for are opportunities to engage the public throughout the development process, not just at the end. So that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, to kind of present the work, you know, the meaningful work through kind of the midpoint of the plan, so that we can get input from local officials, neighboring communities, key partners, and kind of the general public, to make sure that the work that the planning team's done so far is on point and we're not missing anything, okay? So table 2 on page 5 kind of lays out by date a historical account of, you know, all the work that's been done since the kickoff in July. Then the rest of section 4, the planning process, we're going to kind of leave as a placeholder right now, because it's where we're going to describe changes since the last plans. So in the case of Danby, that would be since your 2016 plan, but in the case of Mount Tabor, they haven't had their own plan since the 2009 vintage, when there was a regional plan. So this is kind of a big update to bring Mount Tabor's plan current.
Now, why are we doing it together? And why there's nobody from Mount Tabor here?
Well, Phil would have been here, but he's an older gentleman and, you know, really just wasn't comfortable coming to an in-person meeting. So, but he's been at all the planning team meetings, and I've in between planning team meetings met with he and Bill to gather input for their plan. And to answer the question, Tom, Mount Tabor really would struggle with the size community that they are to try to do this plan themselves. And quite frankly, they share resources with Danby in so many areas related to emergency management, that it just made sense. And so I had approached the board last year, December, January timeframe, about whether or not they would be willing to partner with Mount Tabor and do a multi-jurisdiction plan. And they were in agreement at that time, so that's where we are today. So section 5 starts on page 8, and this is really what I would consider, in layperson's term, just kind of the problem definition part of the plan. The planning team went through and did a community hazard risk assessment where they looked at the probability of certain hazard impacts happening in the communities and what the potential impacts of those events would be in terms of impacts to life, the local economy, public infrastructure, and the environment. And as a result of that, really, you know, it's a high-level planning assessment. It's not overly complex or technical. They basically identified flash flooding, fluvial erosion, which is basically erosion associated with the movement of a stream or a river within its channel. And then to a lesser degree, inundation type flooding, all of which are typically associated with a thunderstorm. And then extreme cold, snow, ice, and high winds that would be associated with winter storms. So those were the two types of hazard impacts that the planning team felt present the highest risk to the communities. So the rest of section 5 basically includes profiles outlining what those impacts are in this region. So where do they happen to cause damage? What type of assets get damaged? Roads, culverts, bridges, properties, things of that nature. So you'll find, you know, we've got a profile for the flooding type hazards that starts on page 9 and runs through page 13. And then we have the severe winter storm picking up on page 13 and wrapping up on page 14. And then basically we've got a vulnerability summary on page 14 that if you wanted to just get the Cliff Notes version of the vulnerabilities, that's what you'd look at. So that's where we're at to date. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
The map that you gave us, and it's kind of small. I think we got a bigger one, right?
Yes. You got like a table size one.
How did you come up with your identifications of those areas?
Local input. So we met with Larry
Yeah.
for Danby, and I met with Bill for Mount Tabor.
Well, I guess that where I'm going, does this lock the town into anything that, because I'm saying the accuracy of the map being to a T,
Yeah, it's,
that we're using anecdotal type things basically in pictures, that what kind of implications is the town locking themselves into with this, with putting areas on maps that we're not 100%?
it's based on past experience, Tom.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is there any implications to these sites that are detrimental to property owners or something that, or to the town, and we're not 100% sure that these are accurate to that, there was actual areas there that we're sure of?
So this is it's a planning tool, right? So based on past experiences, areas that have been vulnerable to the types of impacts that are described in the plan are what are shown on the map. So does it lock you into anything? I'm not sure what that anything is. What do you mean by what?
I mean, I would question some of these areas, and so which besides the point, and so is it for us to put things in here that maybe we're not 100% sure are accurate as far as some of the areas? What are the, what type of issues could this be for the town on the negative side of it? I mean, you're saying that it's not really a contract or anything.
I don't see a negative side to it. I think it's an area that lays out, based on past experience, these are areas that have been impacted and are vulnerable because they may be repeat spots. But I would encourage you to take a look at the map.
Right, and I have, and I looked at it earlier, and that's what brought this question up. It didn't just pop in.
Yeah, so I would welcome you to mark up the map. That's why it's here.
And that's where I was going, because I figured that the town, as a body, the select board, we've got to basically sign off on this, and that we should probably agree that with the map itself, since that's kind of a key,
Absolutely.
you know, thing in this actual.
Sure.
For instance, might this cause someone to have flood insurance?
No.
Okay.
No. This is a public infrastructure. This is basically really focused on public assets. So municipal assets. You're talking about flood insurance driven by things like a FEMA special flood hazard area map, the firms. This is not anything to do with that. We're not reading.
No, and that's, we're just trying to be clear with what we're, and so for the town though, any of these areas that are marked in as, flash flooding or, any of them, is there anything that's, I guess, is detrimental to the town if the town doesn't, I mean, if an area that is marked up
Nobody's gonna come out and like penalize you for having made the right or the wrong call on the map.
Okay.
This is basically just, this is where we think we have potential for there to be impacts, and that's basically what you use to develop what kind of projects the town feels would be reasonable and practical to implement to try to minimize the impacts in those areas from future events. That's really where this is going to be going.
Sorry, I just have like a what if situation. So say we know we have like potential storms coming, like could using that map then be a resource that, well, maybe we need to make sure these areas that are high in flooding. The scenario you've just described is more of a response scenario. So there's an imminent threat coming and you're looking to prepare to weather the storm. That's a response kind of focus. This is more of a sunny day plan where you say, these are areas that we know have been vulnerable in the past. These are areas that we know we would like to make improvements to, maybe upsize a culvert to make the area more resilient. And you would do that work, you know, not under the pressure of an incident occurring. You would do it, you know, as part of a planned project so that when the storm does come the next time, the amount of damage would hopefully be lessened. So it's sometimes hard to get, you know, your head around the difference between a mitigation project and a response type project.
There's, just to be clear, there's nothing regulatory about this one.
Correct. That's a good way to, yes, that's a good way to capture.
So it's not tying the town or landowners or anything into anything.
No. And quite frankly, I think the opposite. I think that it can be used to leverage opportunities for grant funding. That's in addition to kind of having everybody be on the same page about where your potential vulnerabilities lie. It can also be an excellent tool to communicate to the state or federal folks who have grant money for mitigation projects, you know, what you might want to accomplish with other funds besides town dollars.
Good.
So, any other questions on anything that I've touched on right now? Are we,
I think it's very nicely done, thank you.
okay? So just in terms of
Oh,
next steps.
one, yes,
Yep.
on page 11,
Oh, okay. Yep.
would you please fix the caption on that picture that was not the Pearl Buck homestead?
Oh, okay.
It was a property that she at one time owned among many others, but it was called the Millbrook House.
Okay. So this is important because I'm sure that there are things on the map and I'm sure that there are things in the plan as they're working drafts that need to be edited. So this is a good segue for me to touch on the next steps here, which is a comment period on the plan. So we're gonna edit that.
Yeah, we get questions all the time. Oh, isn't that too bad that Pearl Buck's house got washed away? But it's so different.
So I definitely don't want to have mischaracterizations like that in the plan.
That's why I'm asking.
So in terms of a
Why are we
public
gonna
comment
do something?
period,
I'm not sure.
we're going to make hard copies of the plan and the large format map available at the town offices. We'll be posting digital copies on the Regional Planning Commission website, the Danby website. There'll be links to it on other social media like the fire department website and things like, or fire department Facebook page and things like that. So we're gonna want, and I'll be sending out copies to the key partners who are listed on the back of the cover sheet. We really wanna cast a broad net, make sure that folks have ample opportunity to look at the content and provide feedback. In terms of an appropriate time period for you folks, I basically could offer up two options and you can pick from one of those or tell me something else that is better suited to the communities. One option would be after tonight's meeting, everything gets posted tomorrow, and basically after about a 2-week comment period, we wrap things up and the planning team resumes work. They basically then take all the comments into consideration, figure out how to work through those and address them in the plan, and then move forward. Or we can, put the notice out there, put the plan out for comment, and then we could wait and have another little, you could maybe schedule some time at the beginning of your next select board meeting to hear discussion from the public and use that as the opportunity to kind of close your public comment period. I'm not sure how folks feel about what's an appropriate time frame to allow the plan for to be out for public comment, and how involved does the select board want to be in that comment period?
Well, I think we should allow ample time. So I don't believe 2 weeks is
No.
nearly enough time for,
I would say from now until our next meeting, so comments that come in, we can discuss at the next meeting.
yeah.
Is that your preference?
Is everybody comfortable with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So normally what I would recommend is that public comments be provided in writing. It's very difficult to manage just verbal comments that come in. So typically the instructions will read to please provide your comments in writing,
Would you send me an email to this effect?
Sure. Who would you like your point of contact to be? It could be a planning team member like Shelley, or it could be a member of the board. However you guys want to handle that is fine with me. Just let me know.
That's fine.
And, yeah,
I'll chat them every day
thank you.
and do what I did with the workings thing.
So Shelley will be the local point of contact? Okay. And do you happen to know the date of your next meeting?
If somebody wants to,
Well, the only problem we're gonna run into with that is it's only 3 weeks out.
Well,
Because
Be
of
what,
this
the
one.
11th?
yeah, the second Thursday is the 11th.
So November 11th? Okay.
Yeah, it's only 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3
Well, I
weeks.
mean, here's a thought. If in 3 weeks you don't feel you have enough information, then we should probably extend it.
Yeah.
But you might get more quickly than you would think.
I've found in 40-some years of being an educator that if you give people 2 weeks to do their homework,
They
get it
take
done
right
in
till the
2
last
weeks.
day.
Yeah, give them 3, they
Right.
take 3.
Right. I mean, the only thing I would caution you about kind of, I think there's a tipping point where you give so much, if you give too much time, we're gonna lose momentum, kind of moving this forward. So finding that sweet spot in terms of what's reasonable to maintain kind of a schedule. I think your next November meeting sounds perfectly reasonable. So I would ask that you have an agenda item on your next agenda to include kind of a public discussion period. I don't think it's as formal as a hearing,
Right.
but just an opportunity for folks
Yeah, we'll do
to
that
come and
under your
discuss the
report.
plan with the board. And then I'm assuming somebody, whoever takes your minutes, or Shelley, or somebody would distill down any comments that you want written and kind of included in the plan. So I would tell you that, you know, there are placeholders in Table 2 for public comment. So my expectation is that comments that are received, if they're substantial and kind of, you know, affect the content of the plan, those would be reflected in an appendix, okay? Because I know from past experience, the state reviewers will be like, well, what comments did you get? If I
Right, we
leave it too
can
general?
get to that when we get there. We really need to kind of start.
So you all set?
So you'll send me an email with what we just talked about that I can preface what goes on our website with that.
Sure, yeah, and I'll include Shelley because I think she's done some posting as well as Tom. Okay?
Thank you.
Great, you're
Thank
welcome.
you very much. Okay, so do I hear a motion for the select board to enter executive session to discuss personnel?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Good night, gentlemen.
Okay, we are going to enter executive session at 8:22, and we will be back shortly. Okay, the record will reflect that the select board has come out of executive session at 8:36, and select board member White has joined the meeting at this point. Okay, I will entertain a motion to make a conditional offer of employment to Randy Young for the position of road crew equipment operator, subject to completion of a driving record check and passage of a pre-employment drug screening.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Motion is made by Powers, seconded by White. Is there any discussion? I hear no discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Motion is carried unanimously. Okay, we'll continue with the road commissioner's report.
Okay, we've got, I had Mark Ricketts come in and do maintenance on the trucks. We had some brakes, wheel seal, and a few other items that they've been taken care of. We finished our fall grading and have the roads hopefully so they'll weather the winter. Larry working alone, he's gotten a large amount of winter sand stockpiled, and he's been able to get the culverts cleaned that we thought were vulnerable culverts for the going into the winter with the leaves in them. So he's actually accomplished a lot in the month alone. That's it for road guy stuff.
Okay, Thank you, Tom. Next, we'll move on to old business, and our treasurer, Jennifer Millard, would like to talk about the purchasing policy. And I believe everybody has a copy of that, which we approved back in August.
So, just because I'm new to this process, I wanted to take over the process with the board to make sure that we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing and have the right paperwork attached to the invoices. So if we start at the top, just the first section, when purchases or services are needed, the following threshold should be followed in the correct level of quote or bid used. Purchase orders, all purchases and services over $250 require a purchase order be submitted. Who's responsible for getting that purchase order and creating that document?
That's a good question.
And have you seen whether or not we actually have a Town of Danby purchase order?
I have not seen anything. As I've been going through the files, I have not seen any documents so far, but I still am going through the files.
And I guess my question comes up is when they're buying gravel or sand, if we do a purchase order per week, per month, I mean, you pay your invoices weekly, so you would like the purchase order as a weekly purchase order?
I'm not sure. I just want to make sure that our process reflects what's actually being done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think we kind of adopted this, and then there's the nuances of trying to figure out how everything in day-to-day life works for it. So we should do weekly purchase orders. So if we're gonna get product for a week, if you're gonna pay it at the end of the week, so every Monday you want them to get a new purchase order number from you.
Or we could do like and I'm just talking out loud, throwing some ideas. Maybe we have a blanket purchase order and we say, we're gonna buy, however many truckloads, and once you reach the limit of that purchase order, you need a new purchase order to carry forward.
Okay. Yeah, that's simple.
Up to an amount kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, we'll keep it under whatever the limit is, $20,000 every time. We'll just do it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
like your winter sand bed, for example, you're gonna buy
Well,
X amount of yards.
you're hoping, yeah, but
Very
see,
good.
the problem is if we only take half of
But
it
I'm
up
saying,
front.
but you're gonna take about half of it up front, so you can peel.
Yeah, so I was just trying to make sure that we reflected what we were actually purchasing. We don't want to do a purchase order for a large amount, even if we get a quote. It's sort of like our salt quote we're gonna give them an estimate of 600 ton, which is close to $50,000. That doesn't mean we're gonna use all 600 ton. So we don't want to really do a purchase order for 600 ton, but we could do a purchase order for probably 150 ton, because we know we're gonna use that. But that, and I'm trying to work with you too, so don't let me steer you on how it works best for you.
Would you be comfortable drawing up that document?
A purchase order? Yes, I can do that.
Well, I think just making sure we're working together on this, because we do have all the winter stuff coming up. And so there will be several things that...
Okay. I will definitely draw up like a purchase order, and then I'll like put documentation, like our process, like a more detailed process.
I do purchasing for my company, and when we're gonna get a vast amount of something, we'll do a blanket order for the course of like 3 months, and then we'll just we'll contact company, be like, can you send another through, just so it's under more of a blanket instead of,
The only concern I have with that is, like where I mentioned with the salt, is we'll do an estimate of, you know, 500 or 600
like,
ton. We may only take a third of that, so.
it depends on how you have your purchase order set up. Like my orders are set up, I can order 400 sheets of plywood, and in the end, I might only end up getting 350, but as they come in, I just adjust it, but I all know it's back to that original purchase, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, and
And like ours are all numbered, and then we have a whole system that does everything, but it's just, instead of every week, I know I'm gonna get a bunk of plywood, instead of having to redo that, I know I'm at least, like, I have it set aside for me. And then for smaller stuff, then I'll redo it, and then depending on where it's purchased from. Just so you know, like, okay, so for November, you have a purchase order. But I don't know also, like what you were saying, the limit of how much they can spend.
Okay, anything else on the purchase order?
So just another question. It says all purchases and services over $250. So if Larry needs tires, is he gonna need to, do up a purchase order?
I would say if that's in our policy, because the tires are a lot more than $250.
Or half a tire?
Yeah, I mean, we locked ourselves into it, so we're gonna have to try to abide by it.
Okay. Okay. So I have just another question on one of the invoices that I received, and this is, it's from Rutland Chimney Services. It's to install the liner for the oil wood stove chimney. The total is $5,075. So according to our policy, it says we're supposed to have written quotes for anything over 5,000. So would we have to get a written quote for this?
Well, I guess as long as we had a written quote from them.
Well, I think we could almost, it wasn't an emergency, but it had to be done to complete the boiler installation.
Exactly.
So it's an extenuating circumstance.
Yes.
Okay.
And there were bids done out on that project.
Well, we called people, they were the only ones that were able to come in a timely manner and do it. And then when they got here, they discovered that the flue was cracked. So it needs to have a liner.
Right, which.
And they can do it the first week of November.
Right, so it's an extenuating circumstance and it's just on the.
I guess what I asked Jen is, let's try to, we'll do our best, anybody who has to purchase, to make sure, but don't be afraid to say, hey, look, this kind of doesn't meet what we're trying to, you know.
Yeah.
We're good with that. We'll get it down after a while.
Emergency, you send out an email, you make phone calls, whatever you have to do, and you get it taken care of.
Okay. And it also states that quotes must be documented, and it sounds like we're supposed to be maintaining a purchase service log binder. So if
You want to start the binder and put the quotes in them as they came in?
Yeah, so if you guys
Perfect.
have quotes, I will put them in a binder.
Yep.
And that's a handy reference for the future then, too.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Any other old business? Okay, new business. I will entertain a motion to waive the 3% penalty for late filing of homestead declarations.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
To give a little background on this, people that do not file their homestead declarations by, I believe it's October 15th, could be charged anywhere from 3 to, what was it, 11%?
I will have to double check.
It was a good number, and the paperwork and whatnot becomes very cumbersome. 3% can be a lot of money, 11% can be a hell of a lot of money. And in the past number of years, we've always waived it, so unless anybody has a strong objection to it, I would encourage passing this motion. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I will entertain a motion to appoint Tom Johnston as the second voting member of the new Regional Emergency Management Committee.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We had an email that came in today about legislative reapportionment. Based on the census, they're going to be drawing some new lines, and our town clerk is wondering if there should be a meeting of the Board of Civil Authority to discuss this and give input. There's a window of opportunity over the next couple weeks.
I read the email, but they didn't show really any actual areas that were changing, did they?
I just caught the title of the email, and I
Did you read
not
it?
Yeah, I couldn't get it to open on my phone, the whole thing, so I
Did
didn't.
you read it? Yeah, no, my concern is, yeah, where they're throwing us, and probably we're gonna have no representation in Montpelier if, they'll send ours to Chittenden County and we can just sit here and take what they give us, so it's worth
having a BCA meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I will pass that on to the clerk, and she can call a BCA meeting. Any other new business? Okay, I don't hear any other new business. Public comment. Tracy, you are on the agenda.
I have here a petition signed by 70 people in town, and I can get more signed if needed.
phone so I can hear it talk.
Yeah.
It says, "We, the undersigned registered voters of Danby, do hereby request the Select Board and Danby Planning Commission provide remote access to all public meetings of the Danby Select Board and the Public Planning Commission." I know you don't want this, but there's a need for it.
Okay. We will take this under advisement, and we will refer it to the town clerk to verify the signatures.
And just so you know, I did ask to either be on the agenda or under new business, and I wasn't allowed to.
That's right, you're at this time. You are on the agenda. Do you see your name there?
You know what I mean?
Well, you're on the agenda. You did what you wanted to do, and
But you're not doing anything.
I can't do anything. These
I wanted to be
signatures
on the
need to
agenda
be
so that there would be
verified.
immediate actions on this.
There can't be immediate action on a petition until all of the signatures are verified as legal voters. We will get back to you.
I've already done that for you.
Is there a thing in here that the town clerk has attested that these are legal voters?
No.
I don't, well, thank you. So the process will work, okay? Don't laugh at me, Tracy. That's the way it works. Petitions have come to the board many times over the years, and that's how it works. Other public comment. Elizabeth.
Go back to that remote meeting, I know that.
What was that?
Doug said he would like to go back to the remote meeting.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, I wanted to speak to that issue as well, because I'm an immune compromised person who didn't feel comfortable being in this room for the entire session. Even though I'm vaccinated 3 times, I really feel that not just because of COVID, but it's kind of a gift that COVID gave us, that we were able to start participating in our town government even if we were disabled, elderly, didn't want to drive at night, you know, I mean, it was kind of like, oh, this is really good. Now I can go to these meetings. And I'm kind of shaky here because I really did feel uncomfortable being in this room this entire time. My job right now is to keep my 30-something-year-old children from having to care for me or bury me. And I'm not being dramatic. I have a friend who just died in Washington State who was well vaccinated but had an immune compromised situation. I just think making an arbitrary decision to cut it off, it left me, I felt like, oh, I have to go to a meeting that I don't feel comfortable to be at in order to even speak about it. And I know we talked about it one day, Brad, and I felt that you were dismissive of what I had to say, and I don't like the tone that even went on here. It makes me very uncomfortable. So, I would like to know from each one of you what your position is on this. Specifically, why would we not make participation in our town government more accessible to more people? I know that it's difficult managing a meeting online sometimes, but there are people who are very good at doing that. I've been in thousands of Zoom meetings over the last 18 months where there is control over who is speaking when. They queue up the questions or the speaking in the chat, and then the people are called upon. It's not a free-for-all. So the management of it can happen. I know Bob Tobin's really good at it. I don't know if he'd be willing to do it, but there must be somebody in town who'd be willing to do it.
He has volunteered to do it.
Oh, great. So I really would like to hear from each one of you on whether you're for it or against it and why.
Well, I'll speak up on Bob Tobin. I had 4 people before the town meeting talk to me, and 6 people after, saying that they felt that Bob was, how do I want to word this? That he was controlling the meeting in such a way that it was one-sided. And for those people...
So let's not legislate Bob Tobin right now.
No, you brought Bob up, so I would like to address that.
Okay, but what I really want to know is why are you for or against remote access to your meetings?
Well, I guess the only thing that I've noticed, and we only had 3 of them, was it, that were remote? Or 4? 4, is that they got to be very non-productive. And I think tonight's meeting was quite productive. And the problem with people being on the line and just feeling that they could blurt out as we went along.
Yes, that can't happen.
And it makes a meeting that we're trying to actually have that helps the town end up basically not being as productive as we can be with the control of the people being in the meeting. Maybe that was just people being new to the Zoom meetings and
and people not being muted when they needed to be muted and stuff like that. Now, if that's a problem that can have a solution, then how do you stand on remote access? If it can be productive but be remote.
Well, I mean, remote meetings are fine. I've never had a problem with remote meetings. I've even said in the past that we, but I like the idea of being able to include everybody in there.
That's right, me too. I agree with you on that. I
But-
think the town voters should have a say.
But my problem still came to the point is the chair usually runs the meeting. The problem with the chair trying to run the meeting and run the computer to keep people.
Yeah, you gotta
Now we're
have a
farming it-
designated person.
And now we're farming it out to somebody, and they're kind of now controlling the meeting because they can mute everybody who has the, so, and we're not aware of that. So we're kind of giving an unelected person the ability to control the meeting, where that's not the point of having elected officials run the meetings.
So what if you had somebody who, because basically what I'm thinking is, the issue at hand is, how do you only unmute people as it's their turn, like we sat here and waited until it was time for the public comment, right? So how do you set it up so the norms and the values of how you want it to work are clearly indicated for anyone that's joining the meeting? And then I don't know.
I think it's a great question.
Find somebody who you do trust. I really, yeah, okay. Really surprised to hear about the feeling of unfair treatment in those other meetings, but I don't really know. I wasn't.
Oh, I didn't say I
Yeah.
heard any unfair
No,
treatment.
well, Steve did.
Okay,
So.
but my concern was the productiveness being lost.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you.
And actually, you had a lot of valid points in some of the meetings, and people were speaking over you, so we didn't even hear you only for like a second, and then we would just hear
It was chaotic.
Okay,
And it
so-
but I'm just here to say, I've been in so many meetings over the last 18 months that were not chaotic, and they had many, many more people. So I think there's a way to do it, and I really think we should strive for that instead of go, no, that was terrible. Blah. Can we not just erase it and see if we can problem solve this?
I know you're asking to hear from the board, but as a public member that was at some of those meetings in person.
Oh, you were here.
I was
Yeah.
here. There was a lot of technical things that were hindering the situation of they couldn't hear us or we couldn't hear them. So like what Tom was saying was interfering with productiveness, but it was also interfering with those of us that were here in person that wanted to speak or have a point.
You guys never even got a comment.
We weren't able to.
Yeah.
And it is trying to navigate, how is that navigated? And I think that's like, I understand why there's reservation associated with that, because it has to be clear. But also, I know you've attended tons of Zoom meetings, but what type of meetings are they? It's the context of the meeting. Like town meetings can get very contentious.
Nobody can be fired in a town meeting.
Right.
And the Zooms that I've all attended, everybody answers to saying that they better be.
Right. Like they're
And-
educational or
yeah.
like you're learning, and it's like it's understanding how to navigate it effectively.
Do you think it can be though?
I don't know. I don't have that answer.
I think it can be. What I've seen done is you have a person who is the host or called, not selling the moderator, but who knows, and anybody who wants to say something can signal the host on there, and the host can say, Brad, we've got 2 or we've got 3 of these, and keep track of who came in order, and only one person talks at a time. I was here for that one meeting. It was kind of ridiculous because people were just blurting in and made it almost impossible for Brad to run the meeting.
It's put a bad taste.
The other part that you bring up is something I don't know how to solve, but I think it can be, and that's the audibility. Can everybody hear what's being said? And I don't have the best ears in the world, so I'm not the best judge, but you're right about that. Yeah.
Like there's navigational
But I think it can be fixed, by the way.
Like, is there time dedicated just to figure out how to navigate this? And like, also what Tom was saying, like, there's the chair's responsibility to have order in the meeting.
Yes.
So then
Yes.
how is that transpired to having other, like another, basically a chair involved in it?
Beth, you brought up some great stuff, and I mean, I don't think anyone on this board, and I am speaking for myself, and I would the board say that wants to limit anybody's access, but we do like to be able to conduct a meeting in professionalism, and I know
I agree.
it wasn't you. I mean, you were conducting as good as you could. It wasn't the people in the, but there was just, it got so, it literally in this room, and Pete noticed it too, was anarchy, and it's tough to, after that, I understand Brad's reservation of trying to control a meeting when that went on.
And then I think as kind of like a result of that catalyst, like one of the topics was that whole ATV thing, the way it was then shifted to the planning commission, and like we were accessible to everybody, and daily we were getting emails, and people were taking their time to put their thoughts into words, and then when we had our meetings, we went over everything, we read over everything, and then we compiled it and presented it to the board, which there was kind of a delay in people's involvement, but it did allow everyone to get their word in effectively, and know that what they had to say was heard, and all the information was provided.
Yeah, I think if there's, you know, when the meetings are set up so that there can be public comment, like tonight, I really wanted to hear what this ARPA guy had to say. My mind's going around on some things that I have some ideas, and
There's a lot of money in here, you should.
almost not enough for what's in my head, but, and I just, it seemed like if that norm is established in advance, that at the end of this topic, if Brad says, are there any questions? You know, it's just, I think maybe we have to educate the public on how to handle themselves. And
I don't know.
So let's do that.
Right, maybe there's a system that these are the rules if you're attending, regardless, and then if there are violations, then
they get cut off. I mean,
right, that's what I'm saying. Like if you speak beyond your turn. Or
I mean, I find myself annoyed when people don't put their faces there. I mean, I'm like, really, you're gonna make me speak to your initials, and I don't know who you are. But that's their, you know. I also don't want them to see
And you know, one thing that I noticed is you're a much better speaker when I get to see you because you articulate. So I like seeing you at the meetings.
I know, but I feel so, when we had more people in the room, and I just, that's why I stepped out. I mean, I'm actually interested in the maps, because I did a huge project at one point where I had to go to all the town halls and make copies of things and then go home, and like, if I could have done it online, it would have been great.
Yeah.
So, but I had to step out because I felt like I need fresh air. I need to know I'm not in there for the entire 2 hours. So anyway, I really would love a commitment from the select board saying, okay, we hear the town. They want some access. Let's try to figure out a way to educate people to be behaved in that scenario and follow some guidelines. We're grown-ups. Right?
And for technology-wise, if you have trouble not hearing, or I've done it by phone a few times and I had trouble hearing at times, can you use some of the ARPA money to whatever?
I think the only problem I would have with that, Tracy, is without the final rules on the ARPA money, spending it and the timeliness that.
Yeah, and it's not going to be timely because.
Is looking, I mean, we're looking for sooner than later for this turnover, meaning in a month, and that I don't think we would feel comfortable committing those funds.
But at least we know the technology is there, and we've got this gentleman putting this all on TV. So everything is going to get heard there, we would assume. So maybe we can, you know, get into some of his expertise and see if our audio could somehow be connected to this audio, and just think there's got to be a way. And I'd like to see us pursue it.
You brought up some great points.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another thing, because Gary Durr's letter, open letter to the select board. He isn't even compromised. And he couldn't hear what he needed to hear in order to get his job done. And I just wonder, like a letter like this is an open letter to the select board, does that become part of the town record?
Did he mail it to the select board?
No.
It was an open letter on front.
Oh, okay, I didn't
Front
get it, yeah,
So I do have a copy here that I printed out because I think it's important. And he also mentions masking in these meetings. I bumped my head on the sign at the door that says masks required, and I was very happy. And then I came in the room and I went, shit. And I really think Vermont is in a very vulnerable position right now. And I wish we could say it's over. It's not over. And we have to take care of each other. And I just think it's what we do for one another. I don't want to bring something to you from Castleton College, you know?
Right.
And well, I would like to submit this and make it part of the record.
Thank you, because I haven't seen it.
Okay, and he, so he mentions masking, he mentions remote access.
Look at that real quick.
Sure, have you not seen it either?
No, I don't do computers. Thank you.
So anyway,
Thank you for showing up though, and.
and then that was the kind of catch-22. Shoot, I have to go to a meeting I'm not comfortable being in to talk about how I need a way to come to the meeting without being there. So, anyway, thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Regarding the petition, we'll have those signatures verified and we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Great.
Last call for public comment.
Pete, anything? Come on.
No, I shot my bolt. I don't know if I mentioned it, we'll try to get our input to you, whatever it is. We were planning in January, but now that I see the final rules, we may not even know those yet. We may have to think about that. That would be my other thought.
The gentleman to my extreme left usually likes to make a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Powers. Is there a second? Fuller? All those in favor? Aye. So we are adjourned at 9 p.m.